In this video, you will learn some best practices when building a Power Automate flow. This walkthrough covers some practices for building iteratively and working with your data. In part 2, you will learn about some settings and design tips to make your flow run better. In addition, there's a link below to the Power Automate guide, which you can see on the screen now, which will guide you through some of these best practices along with more details and additional tips along the way. So first, let's get started. The first best practice to consider is to build your flows iteratively. Here you can see an example of a very large, very complex flow for facilitating conversations. It has conditions, it has terminates, it has additional conditions and switch statements, and is interacting with Teams, SharePoint, some third-party connectors, Dataverse, and a lot of other assets. Now, when you look at a flow like this, it's really easy to be overwhelmed and think, oh man, I should just be able to build this thing all in one swoop and then hit go and it'll run. But that's not the case even for the most seasoned designers. Instead, what you're going to want to do when you build a new flow is you're going to want to build that flow piece by piece. You want to do one step, confirm that it works, and then do the next step, etc., until you come to a working solution. In addition to thinking of being iterative, sometimes you're like, well, I have this great flow and I love what it does, but now I want to do more. I want to add a new piece of functionality to this flow. In those scenarios, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to build the new functionality outside the flow. Always learn outside of the flow that you actually want to change. And so what we most typically will see is that you'll want to go to create and then do an instant cloud flow, and then you'll want to manually trigger a flow. The beauty of manually triggering a flow is it doesn't require you to go change data. It doesn't require you to interact with your entire process. This just lets you do a flow in a one-off scenario where you can control the inputs and outputs. So then now you would go through, build your actions, your new functionality, your new expressions, and then you would then take and incorporate those into your larger flow. So that's one of your first tips, is to use manually trigger a flow to discover new functionality. When you start building flows, you're going to start to incorporate your own data. And as you incorporate your own data, you can make some decisions and have some best practices that will keep your flow smaller in size and smaller in API calls, which can be a limit that produces not only performance penalties, but can actually run you over the thresholds and the supportability of flow. So one thing to consider is this flow. This flow is manually triggered. And then we are getting items from our data source. This could be SharePoint, Dataverse, SQL. But once we get these items, then what we wanted to do here is we wanted to filter through those items, and we wanted to only send emails to where the people that were the department equaled executive. And so here you can see this flow is kind of complex, right? Get items, we're doing apply to each. The first thing we do inside the apply to each is a condition to check and see, and then we send the email. This is an example of a bad idea. You don't ever want to do a condition inside of a loop, if at all possible, in order to minimize your calls. Because in this case, what will happen is we make one call to get all the items, and then we have to process and make a call for every item. So if we have hundreds or thousands of employees in this list, then we're going to have to go and loop through here hundreds or thousands of times to get that data. On this flow here, this flow does the same exact thing. But what we've done is we've said get items, and we've taken advantage of the ability to do a filter query. So in this case, an OData query that gets the department equals executive. Now we're filtering, we're only getting back the number of items that match our criteria. We're letting the data source, so in this case, SharePoint is doing all the work to par down the list. And then here we're returning just those items, and we're going to loop through just the 4 or 5 employees that match executive. So we get the same output, the same results, but this one has less steps, less complexity, but gets you the same end result. So filtering your data early, as early in the process as possible, is always a win. If you switch back over to the flow that has too many pieces, you'll also notice here that Flow Checker does its best to warn you that you're getting back too much data potentially. So this warning sometimes can be disregarded. Sometimes you do want all the records, but it's always good to check your Flow Checker and confirm that what you want to see is correct over there. Also remember, if you're having errors here, you will not be able to save. So keeping a close eye on Flow Checker will keep you out of trouble. And that covers this round of best practices. We'll see you over in part 2 to talk about some of the additional settings that you might take advantage of to build better flows.